Blake, what would it take for you to continue to do this podcast for another 5 years?
Toby, you don't have enough money to keep me here for another 5 days.
Welcome to the ChurchGear podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who is currently holding out from podcast training camp until I get a contract extension. And I'm here with the GM of ChurchGear, my co-host, Toby Walters.
A contract extension? That would indicate that you already have a contract.
Toby, you don't remember signing all those things, but I gave you a couple of tropical drinks, and here we are.
That's a good point. I would not doubt that that's a possibility.
I mean, that's all the times that I've gotten raises, so it's been working out. I make about $200K here.
That is a great salary for not really. What do you do here, Blake?
What can I embezzle all day?
So we had our leadership quarterly meeting. As you know, if you're on a church staff or if you work in any sort of business or company, you know there are meeting schedules, and so we've kind of made our own routine of meetings.
Can you believe they let us come to that?
Yeah. It's a good point. Did we not crash that meeting?
I think so.
I own the company, yet I'm not invited to the leadership meetings because, I break stuff. So we had our leadership quarterly, and we did several different things and exercises. And one of the things I wanted to do was kind of an exercise around, let's envision 5 years out. Like
Toby's brain just went right off the rail. He was like,
the record needle was like,
project.
Yes. Project out
forward.
5. Yeah, sure.
Vision.
One of those. And so I kind of proposed some possible scenarios, and I made up every single one of them because I wanted to clarify that none of these are actually in the works. They're just all made up. But essentially, would this make you more likely to work at ChurchGear in 5 years? Less likely? Or you don't necessarily have an opinion. It might not matter.
That shocked me. I have an opinion on everything. So when people kept raising their hands on it different, I was like, y'all are crazy.
Yeah, and I kind of get what they were saying. No matter the scenario, they could have said, well, it totally depends on what kind or who or specifics around it. And so a lot of times they were saying like, if it was set up in the right way, I'd be fine with that. It wouldn't necessarily make a difference. Whereas some things, it was so clearly obvious that everybody was like, yeah, if that happens, I'm much likely to find another job.
Scaredy cats, every one of them.
And so it was, Blake, it was the most polarizing thing we did during that meeting. I know so, because you guys all did a survey, and I don't know who. Like, it was a completely anonymous survey.
Oh, did you get bad marks on this?
Some people absolutely loved it, and some people did not. And it pokes at some people as far as like, wait a second, I might not work here in 5 years, or, you might change things. I think a running theme was that people generally enjoy what they're doing here and don't want things to change too much.
Well, I'll just say, evolve or die. The dinosaurs ain't here either. I bet they wanted things not to change as well.
It's true. And I think this would be actually a very valuable game lesson exercise for church production teams to kind of go through, like make some, what if scenarios. Let's say you had a totally different pastoral leadership. Does that make you more likely, less likely?
Or you get an HBO documentary made about you. More likely or less likely?
Oh, let's hope for just the church's sake in general that we don't get any more HBO documentaries about fallen church leaders.
Also, let me just tell you something right now. Toby decided to put a question in there that was like, if I stayed here and was very active, would you be more likely to stay? Or would you like me to go to Florida and still own the company, but be less active? And I was like, what a self-interested, pat me on the back question ever. Forced me to raise my freaking hand on that. And it's only because I need you for pods. So I just want to make sure you know that.
I get it. I mean, I legit wanted to know, do you guys really need me to be involved in the day-to-day to feel like you enjoy working here more? Or would you prefer that I just get out of your way and that's a legit question, because you guys are all capable adults and have amazing skill sets.
Now that you got Deshaun, I think that question is real different a year ago. But yeah, that was such a self-interested thing.
And as the parent of teenagers, for example, my teenagers would say, yeah, we prefer you just go away and let us live our lives now.
Well, that shows teenagers don't know anything, but someone that knows a bunch is the former production director at Elevation Church, the current design engineer at Skylark, and the number one picker of glasses, Andy Bentley. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. You know what's funny is my glasses are probably the number one most complimented feature about me. So I'm glad you picked up on that. Thank you.
I was going to say your face is awesome, but Blake just bypassed the face and said your glasses are awesome.
It's a good pairing, I guess.
That's true.
Okay.
The two, they complement each other.
You take any burger or chicken sandwich and put a ton of sauce, whatever your sauce is, Chick-fil-A, Zaxby's, whatever. You're going to notice the sauce the most. The glasses are the sauce of the face.
Yeah. I mean, I miss COVID with you, Blake, where you would wear a mask sometimes and I didn't have to see your face. That was the best feature about your face.
You know, I miss that too, because I could actually breathe and not have to smell you. Okay. Andy, you don't have to worry about smelling either of us because we're not in the same room, but you do have to worry about fooling us. So we're going to do 5 Truths and a Lie, which is our weekly game to introduce our guests. Toby, you going to finally win one of these?
Blake, I am playing the long game, and one of these weeks I'm just going to turn it on, and then you're going to be like, uh-oh, what happened?
Okay, Dak Prescott. Number 1, I never actually finished high school. That's such a move because...
I know. He looks very intelligent with those glasses. So.
Well, he also looks very young, so what if he's like 17?
It's possible.
Number 2, I was briefly the LD for One Republic. See, I don't prep these episodes anymore. I would have seen that already. That's my favorite band. Okay.
Well, is Taylor Swift not a band? Is that why?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I guess that's
He's an artist. It's not
there
a band.
it is.
Okay.
Different.
Number 3, Steve Jobs emailed me the day he stepped down as CEO.
Okay.
Now, if this is a mass email, I'm
Yeah,
going to call so much BS. Number 4, one time I forgot to turn Stephen Furtick's mic on before he walked on stage.
Ooh. And I mean, I don't know when Pastor Furtick got just ripped, but like he's scary buff now. So hopefully that was, if that's true, that was before he got big muscles.
Number 5, one Easter, I was awake for 60 hours straight.
Oh, I'm so sad because that's probably a reality for a lot of production people.
Hang on, help me out. That's 2 whole days and another
half.
14 hours.
12.
Sure.
Math is hard for you, Blake. I get it.
It's a Friday. I've been drinking all day. Number 6, one time my dog pooped in Elevation's main control room. Wow.
I could say the same thing about our podcast studio if you were my dog.
I'm your pet. So
yeah.
When people ask me what I do at ChurchGear, I say what I do, and then I go, I'm mostly just Toby's pet.
Yeah. This is a solid list. Like
this is very solid.
Yeah.
It's as solid as that poop.
I wrestled over this one.
Yeah.
I fasted and prayed and interceded over this list. So I hope it's good.
This is a very holy list. Okay.
I'm going to jump on the Easter. I don't think it was 60 hours.
I'm going to jump on that he never forgot to turn Pastor Furtick's mic on, or it was actually somebody else that did it.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
All right. So he's got Furtick's mic. I've got the Easter hours. What was your lie, Andy?
It was number 4. I'd never forgotten to turn Pastor Stephen's mic on before he went out on stage.
Okay, that's bad audio, Toby. I keep asking for a sound machine.
That's the Superman theme.
Soundboard, certainly.
I know.
Yes.
It's almost like we should get some gear.
It's just about to say, it's almost like we don't have 3 of them.
Okay, so did anybody else forget to turn on Stephen's mic? Or
no, I don't. I honestly can't. To my memory, I cannot remember a time where somebody's forgotten to turn his mic on. If anything, it might have gotten turned off in the interim, but it's such like a process to get his mic on that we are constantly checking. Is it on? What's the battery life? I mean, you're checking it 4 or 5 times. It's just such a serious thing. I'm so OCD about it too that I'll check it 4 or 5 times. I might have just looked at it and saw that it was on, and I'll look at it again right before I hand it to him. It's just, I don't know. It's one of those things that it's so stressful you can't miss it. You don't ever take it for granted, right?
Toby, do you have anything like that? Because I'm that way on my door. I'll check my doors locked 3 times.
Well, I'm just thinking, every time we turn everything on in the podcast studio to record a podcast, like, have you forgotten to turn on anything in the podcast studio?
Yes, many times. We're not going to talk about it. It's also why you can see me checking. I check all the red lights every about 7 minutes.
And Andy, here at ChurchGear, we bought some of Elevation's old gear, and I know we got several wireless mics, and so we'd often joke that, I wonder if this is the one with the Furtick dust on it. So it was.
At one point we thought about having all the artists that would come in sign the front of house console. So whenever we wanted to sell that, we could mark it up as an exclusive, one of a kind, signed SD10.
My son is always asking, like, hey, if you get so-and-so's autograph, is it worth a bunch of money? And because here in Nashville, you'll see celebrities around town. And so he'll just say, like, why don't you get an autograph? And I'm like, a celebrity autographing a napkin isn't really worth anything.
Unless you're my mother-in-law and I've got Taylor Swift's autograph on a napkin that my brother-in-law got at Whole Foods, and then you lost it, Gina, and I hate you. I hate you.
But I'm wondering,
thing?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Still, I tore through the attic, could not find it. She's like, I just set it somewhere. You set the Queen's autograph somewhere?
We're totally going down a rabbit trail, but we're just having fun. My mother-in-law went to opening day of Disneyland in 1955, and Walt Disney autographed her ticket, but she cannot find it.
Oh, that's worth some money.
I know.
I'm telling you, mother-in-laws are the worst. There should be a day like Mother-in-law Day where we all get to punch them or something. It's like the Purge.
My mother-in-law is wonderful, so...
roll up to the Antiques Roadshow with the vintage signed 1950s Walt Disney World ticket.
Yeah.
That's something.
Disneyland.
Yeah. Dang.
What do we think? 50K? 20K?
10. Probably 10.
I don't know. I think it'd probably be worth like maybe $1,000.
Still. Okay. Tell us about staying up for 60 straight hours, if you remember any of it, since you were delirious by the end.
I was. At one point, I could not actually walk straight, but that was Easter weekend, 2010, which, if you remember anything about that time, that was actually the week that the original iPad came out. And I was working at the Apple store part-time, and I was also contracting with Elevation. So I did the launch of the iPad, and I was on the visuals team. We were responsible for store reset, window displays. So from Friday, I kind of took a nap Friday afternoon because I knew I had an overnight that night and then didn't know what the weekend looked like. So I was up at Friday afternoon, did all night Friday night into Saturday morning, and worked until about 1 p.m. at the Apple store doing the iPad launch. Then went straight from there to the local. At the time, it was Time Warner Cable Arena. Now it's Spectrum Center for Easter with Elevation, and contracted with the AV company they were using at the time, and did Saturday to Sunday. I think it might be fudging the numbers because I might have laid down on a couch and fell asleep for 20 or 30 minutes. But then from Sunday morning until load out, about the same time I woke up on Friday afternoon, where the 60 hours came from straight. Wow. I was absolutely delirious by the end of it. I literally remember trying to walk backstage and just drifting to the side and almost ran into a camera operator because I couldn't walk straight. It was nuts. I'll never do that again. It was so terrible.
That actually sounds like SEAL training, like Navy SEAL training school. I think they stay up for, it's something crazy, like 5 days in a row, but they get hour naps once a day or something like that. It's one of the most brutal processes I've ever read about.
And then I drove home like an idiot.
Oh.
I'm like,
I was just about to ask.
So dumb.
And so I'm assuming because you worked at the Apple store, that's why you got an email from Steve Jobs when he stepped down.
That is exactly right. That's where that one came in. So yeah, it is kind of a little bit of a mass email, but not everybody got that email when Steve Jobs resigned as CEO and handed the reins over to Tim Cook. I got Andy.Bentley@apple.com, got that email.
Dang.
So.
Also on that 60 hours, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm really tired, everything is funny.
Oh, yeah. Was
everything really funny for you, Andy? And did it get to a point where you couldn't laugh anymore because you hit a new plane of existence? I've never gone past that phase.
Yeah, I probably did reach some level of enlightenment or something at that point. They do. What's the stat that's like after 20 hours or so, it's like basically being over the legal blood alcohol limit.
Yes.
In terms of mental acuity, it was worse than that. So I might as well have just slammed like a 12 pack and drove home after that. That's how bad it was.
You hear that, Pastor? If you make your techs work to this rate, you're slamming 12 packs into them.
Well, it's because he was doing both Apple Store and contracting. So you can't just blame the pastor.
Exactly.
The pastor
I
and Steve
overexerted
Jobs.
myself.
Yeah.
There's a lesson there in self time management, self-restraint, and not overexerting yourself. But I don't know, when you're 20, who cares? Just go for it.
Speaking of who cares, in math, 2 negatives make a positive. What if he slammed 12 beers and then that hit his exhaustion and then he was fine?
Yeah.
It's the dumbest thing I've ever said, but still.
2 wrongs make a right.
Yep. Speaking of stuff that's right, tell us about being the LD briefly for One Freaking Republic.
I basically just did a one-off for them. So my buddy brought me in to do a festival, and they were the headliner, and so I did lights for them. So I get to say I was the LD for One Republic. That was a crazy one though, because during loadout, Ryan Tedder has this big like carbon fiber cello, and thing's probably $20,000 or something, but it got stolen during loadout. Dang. Somebody just walked out with it, and he was looking around and he was like, "Where the heck is my cello?" He didn't say heck, but
yeah.
And somebody had just like acted like they knew what they were doing, part of the crew, and walked out with it. It was wild.
That right there is how you can make it in life. You just pretend like you belong places. And so you can use it for good or evil.
Yep.
They never asked me to host this podcast. I just sat down here. You can make this is a bad idea. You can make a whole cottage industry out of just wearing a black shirt at festivals.
Yeah.
Like Drew Hester talks about it all the time. He says, if you want to really up your game, grab a ladder, and no one's ever stopping.
Yeah.
High vis vest.
Yeah. Blake, you're in all black today. Just go in the back and grab like a Clearcom headset and then show up at any event and just be like, just put your head down and be grumbling and walking fast. You'd be good to go.
The grumbling. That's nice. Well, Andy, why don't you give us some of your tech background, man? Give us a quick snapshot of, what led you to Elevation and then what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a good segue because the guys that I used to work with that did those kind of shows for One Republic and the local AV company that I used to work with. Actually, one of the guys that I work with now, Zach at Skylark, he and I go way back, and that's kind of how we met. But around 2008, 2009, they started doing events for this up and coming church called Elevation that everybody started talking about, and they were doing these crazy Christmas and Easter productions, and him and his buddies would always show me pictures of the stuff that they were doing with them, and this, crazy cool creative stuff and stuff I'd really never seen done in church. And I was like, man, it'd be really fun to do some stuff with them. And kind of one thing led to another. And eventually I got my foot in the door and was able to do some events, Easter being one of the first big ones back in 2010. I was able to do some video server management for them. And then kind of got in as a lighting designer. They were looking for somebody to start contracting for lighting programming just to kind of take things to the next level on that side of things. And I started doing that and started thinking maybe this could be a cool place to work full time. I was at my family's church, my home church in Concord at the time, and doing video and motion graphics and stuff. And I was like, maybe they do cool motion graphics and video stuff. Maybe I could do an internship or something. So I actually came on as an intern in 2011 in the fall for motion graphics. So kind of an offshoot, like a random way to get there. But I did that and had a ton of fun. And then at the end of it, they kind of were like, we'd love to bring you on board. We know you're doing motion graphics now. We know you also kind of do the lighting programming stuff. We have a position as an AVL tech. Which one do you think would fit better? Because we don't want to force you into one or the other, but we kind of want to just bring you on and put you in the right spot. So I was like, I think the tech director seems like a bigger need right now, and it feels like maybe I would succeed more in that. So I did that, and basically just me and a couple other people ran the tech department, and we were everything: installation, support, upgrades for all. At the time it was 3 or 4 campuses, and then went to 5, and then 6 and 7, and
working 60 hours straight.
Yeah, doing 60 hours straight. I think I only did something close to that one other time, but we're past that now. But yeah, and then I did the lighting designer. I kind of was an AVL tech, but I had a specialty in lighting programming. So the lighting thing was always my my real focus. A lot of the other stuff was secondary. Then brought in another guy to help with that, and kind of became more of a supervisory role over the lighting as we started expanding more campuses. It was too much for one person to manage. I was like, well, let me see if I can do more of a leadership role in that and set more creative direction, and do a little bit less hands-on. So I did that for a season. And then around 2018, I was like, maybe I might be done with the lighting thing. I like it, but I've been doing it a long time. I'd like to take um, just take myself to a different focus that's more on systems and larger production, and see if I can make a difference in a little bit higher capacity. So kind of took on a role called Central Production Director. It was uh, sort of a dotted line oversight of all the production directors at the campuses. And I really focused on just helping build systems and processes to make sure that they were set up for success. And then like common misses were either minimized or eliminated, just that kind of stuff, because that's what I really thrived in. I did some of the like, I'm not a huge like inspirational public speaker type leader, so I didn't do a ton of that stuff. I did some and tried it out. It just didn't always feel right. Um, but yeah, I just kind of kept my head down and did more of a background role, a little behind the scenes role there, and then transitioned again from the kind of the opposite swing of the pendulum. Went from a leadership role to a very heavy technical role as a broadcast engineer, to help out. Again, we're kind of full circle with Zach. I was working with Zach at the time, helping him out lead the broadcast facility. So basically just dove in to try to become the best broadcast systems engineer that I could, and did that for 2 or 3 years. Stepped in, took over for Zach when he left, and ran the thing on my own for a little while. And then 12 years had passed by the time I
Dang.
blinked, and it was 12 years later. And I was like, man, a lot's changed. And I feel like I've done a lot here, but I feel like maybe it might be time to actually start looking at something else, you know? And so that's sort of my elevation journey, right? It was like, I would always, every few years, I'd always wrestle with, am I doing the right thing? Or maybe it's time to mix things up. And then the great thing about elevation is they always had opportunities to do other stuff in the organization. That was one of the things they really valued too, is just flexibility and adaptability. Most churches do too. It's your role never looks the same as it did when you first started. And I'm a very adaptable person. That's one of my strengths. And so it was a great environment, and I thrived in that, and had a lot of fun. But yeah, that's sort of the gamut. That's the background, the 20,000 foot overview of my my career at Elevation. It's not a career, it's a calling.
Yeah.
Sorry, but yeah, you know the phrase.
Yep. And talk to us just a bit about Elevation. Obviously, being in the spotlight, everybody has assumptions. And so are there common misconceptions that you guys would correct, other production people that ask questions of you? Or, honestly, is it much different than any other mega church on a Sunday morning?
It was always kind of tough because we never knew how we stacked up. I don't want to say stacked up against, but how we compared to other churches in terms of our processes and our operations and stuff. That's the one challenge, is you never really get out and see how other people do stuff because you're so focused on what you're doing. But I was just surprised at how many people thought we really knew what we were doing, I guess. That's the thing. There was really nobody that was like hired in a highly qualified role in production. We all learned as we went. And we were all smart. Like we don't hire, Elevation doesn't hire dumb people, right? They might not hire immediately qualified people, but they hire smart people for the most part. You always have your outliers.
Yeah,
but
Blake.
Yeah, right.
I'm sitting over here thinking about you, but I'm like, we can't make a hiring joke about Toby because he's a founder. Dang it.
Yeah, nobody hired him.
Nope. Jesus did.
Yeah,
wow, I just rolled my eyes so hard I passed out.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it's just so much of it is learn as you go and adapt and self-taught. So I think people would come in and think like, oh, you guys have, like, how many of you guys went to college, or studied this in college or have a degree in this, and we're like, the ones that did graduate college don't have a degree in broadcast engineering.
Yeah.
But we also knew when to ask for help, right? That was one of the things I think we got better at as the years went by, was just knowing when we were at our limit. Early on, there was very much this sort of like, we're going to do it ourselves, this sort of pridefulness of like, we're going to do everything in house, we're going to do it ourselves. As years went on, we realized the value of like, hey, you can ask for help. We don't have to be the smartest people in the room all the time. We can actually bring in people that know what they're doing and ask for help. But I think that, I mean, at the end of the day, just nobody really knew what they were doing when they started. They all learned on the spot, and they all adapted, and they all grew as the church grew. And also the other second misconception is that Elevation has unlimited budget and resources and money, and that's absolutely not true. We get scrappy a lot, and budgets are a real thing regardless. I mean, everybody has a budget, but we had to get scrappy with a lot. So when people would complain about Elevation spending all this money, this or that, I was like, no, we bought stuff from y'all for stuff, just because it's like, we don't have budget to upgrade all this whatever it might be, or we're trying to launch a campus for as little as possible. And because that money can be useful in other places if we can save it. So it's budgets are a real thing. Nobody has an unlimited budget. No church has unlimited budget. Sure, we might do a lot, but we would always do a lot with a little. And that was one of the things that I just appreciated about the organization too.
I mean, you're speaking my language. Obviously, that's the whole reason ChurchGear exists, because I love it when churches get scrappy and make, wise budget decisions. Like,
it sounded desperate. It sounded like a desperate budget decision. He's like, we even bought something from y'all. I'm like, is that an ad? Right? Is that an ad, or is that bury it deep?
ChurchGear.com, the wise decision.
Even Elevation uses ChurchGear.
Even Elevation had to buy from us.
That's right. Andy, when it comes to, Elevation Church versus Elevation Worship and the touring side, are those two totally separate production worlds, or is there some overlap? I mean, obviously, but everybody sees Corey Edwards' photos out there and makes assumptions again, but tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, this one will be a little more raw of a topic, because this one was tough. If I'm being really honest, this was a tough journey. I think our first tour was in 2011. Or 2014, sorry. We started off really small, right? So the first tour was it was all north, like Pennsylvania, Tennessee, like all up in the north, and it was in the winter. So every load in was in the snow.
Yeah.
But we did all that ourselves. I think we had one trucking company come in to obviously help, and buses, but in terms of the crew, it was all us, and then volunteers and it was all in churches. It was all in medium, smaller churches. And that one, it was a ton of fun, because it was like, we're kind of in on the ground level of this thing. And it's just cool to get out and see how other people that you've never met before, or that haven't even been to the church, how they can respond to, what you're doing. And it was a ton of fun. I kind of fell in love with it. And we did more and more tours, and they started to grow and grow and grow. And eventually got to the point where the worship team and the leadership on that side had to say, okay, these tours are taking so much resource from the weekend, and that can't continue. So they kind of came to a crossroads where it's like, we have to start bringing in third parties to do tour. And that's sort of where Corey stepped on the scene. And for me, it was tough, because tour was this really shiny, sexy thing that was a lot of fun. And now I'm kind of being removed from it. And it was tough. It was really tough. But I look back on it and think, Corey took that to a place that I don't think I ever could have. Maybe if I had focused on it, I don't think I'm not capable of it, but the way he was able to focus on it and take it somewhere, would I have really wanted to hold back what Elevation Worship could do in their tours now, just because I wanted to be involved, instead of having somebody that really knows what they're doing come in and help, right? And that's kind of where I alluded to, I've learned some of these lessons of, hey, bring in people that that really know what they're doing that can help. So I mean, that was a journey, and that took a while for me to get over, but it was kind of like an interesting full circle moment. And this might sound kind of petty. I don't mean it to sound this way, but in the beginning of 2020, we announced the spring tour, and one of the venues, I think it was Radio City Music Hall, like super iconic. I mean, this once in a lifetime type of thing. And I'm like, the tour, the whole team is going on that show, and I'm like, man, that would have been awesome. And then that tour got canceled because of COVID.
Yeah.
And our team on the broadcast side ends up doing, being a very key component of Easter Sunday. And we have, however many hundreds of thousands of people watch that weekend. And it's like, okay, what I do might not be sexy, but it's important.
Yeah.
And this is where I need to be. And, it was, like I said, it might sound kind of petty, but it was more of a moment of me saying like, okay, everybody has purpose and place, and everything we do is important. Not everything is sexy, but we're not chasing the sexy thing, right? Chase what God's called you to do. So yeah, it was a journey, but so as of now, the tour team is completely separate. Now we've started to reintegrate a few roles, like bring in a few key players to go out on certain roles on tour.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the ownership and the real management of it, it's all contracted out, and it's way better that way. That way they can focus on actually what they're doing. It doesn't make sense to hire that full time. They might do that at some point, but it seems like a better operation, a little bit healthier for everybody too. And that way nobody's staying up 60 hours to try to do tour and the weekend.
Yeah. So speaking of staying up 60 hours and, obviously elevation and other things you've worked can have a very high stress level when you're trying to pull off events of that size. How do you keep your temper in check through the chaos? And I mean, God forbid you ever let it, cut loose. I'm sure you never lost it.
Never. I've never thrown a keyboard across the room and rage quit.
Wait, what?
Computer keyboard or music keyboard?
Computer keyboard.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I could. I probably could throw. I've gotten mad enough. I could probably throw a keyboard across the room, but
yeah,
a little more collateral damage to that. No, I'll answer the question first. It's not easy. I definitely don't have I don't have a huge temper, but I'm a bottler. I bottle things up. So little annoyances over time, I will eventually just let it out, and whoever is near me kind of gets the damage. But I've learned that kind of stuff, not to the degree of like needing anger management classes, but it's just, or maybe I do. I don't know. I haven't asked, but I just I've you try to do all the normal stuff. Like you step back, you take a breath, you realize that what you're doing is important, but it's not the end of the world. Whatever is going on is not worth the reputational or physical or emotional damage that you're about to cause if you blow up on somebody. And I don't know, you kind of have to learn. It's tough because there's always this dichotomy between excellence and I don't know the word, but kind of a chill environment, right? Mm-hmm. There's this. And that was a little bit of the culture of elevation too. It was like, if things are chill, something's wrong. Early on, it was a little bit of a maybe to the deficit of health, of personal health. But it was sort of this thing where if everybody was calm or things were like not tense, then we weren't doing our job, or we weren't doing good enough, or there wasn't enough going on. So I've learned to sort of disassociate that, right? That things can be smooth and things can go well. Even if things are going wrong, we can stay calm and we can stay collected and not have to go crazy. But that was, and I'm still not totally there, but that was a lot of that 12-year journey, was learning how to control that and how to keep myself calm in those tense environments. I think I'm a little bit OCD too. So like when things would go wrong, I would feel like personally we've missed this mark, or this wasn't perfect, right? This sort of perfectionism mentality. And those things over time would sort of stack up. And if that one more thing would go wrong, I would just lose it. And yeah, but I just saw how much damage that caused. And I was like, it's not worth it. Somebody missed a lighting cue. Okay. Life will go on. I don't think that 5 people or less are going to get saved because that lighting cue didn't get hit. And maybe, but
Maybe 4
how many
people
more people are
less.
going to get? Maybe 4 people less, but how many more people am I gonna traumatize because I blow up on them because somebody missed a cue?
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. So it's stuff that's easy to say in the moment or right now, though, but in the moment it's hard to practice. So
Blake, how do you handle it when you finally get fed up with yourself and are ready to blow?
There was a moment when me and Toby were coming back from a gear run early on from South Carolina. We were like, what if we just drove home?
Ironically, it was Charlotte area. It wasn't Elevation, but a lot of other churches around Charlotte.
We were like, let's just see how far we can get. And we left at like 7 p.m. And by, I don't know.
It's like 2 a.m. we got back.
At 1 a.m., I remember looking at you and I was like, Toby, I just want you to know I'm annoyed with myself even, but I can't shut up. I need something to keep me awake.
Yeah. It's amazing just the reality, like when you are part of a team, you can still blow up at people. It's just not going to go well. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
So you have to make tough decisions to allow certain things to go and just decide, what actually can I not let go? What should not be let go? And then how do you have a fruitful conversation around that rather than blowing up at the person?
Yeah, the amount of acid I've had to buy to dispose of angered coworkers is just getting out of hand. I don't have the budget for it anymore. So yeah, you just have to be nice.
Sound like you work for a Mexican cartel.
Toby, who do you think? What do you think we do here? This is all a front.
I learned a lot from Breaking Bad.
Exactly.
That would actually not funny, but funny if someone got into drugs from watching Breaking Bad and they were successful.
Like learned how to do it.
And that's like a documentary in 20 years.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Well, Blake's trying to break good, but it's still not taking.
I was literally setting up this podcast.
Oh my gosh.
It's telling Nathan, I was like, I hope I get into heaven.
So
we all do, I think.
Andy, you talked about, systems and processes. So talk to us about, I liken church production often to there are 1,700 fires burning at all times, and you don't have enough time to actually put any of them out. You just have to keep them all at bay so they don't burn down the house. So how do you kind of put systems and processes and organization in to, keep the house from burning down?
Yeah. There used to be this mentality on our staff that it was like, you can't really have structure and creativity because the more structure you have, the less creative you can be, right? That was especially challenging working with the worship team, and Pastor Stephen, especially on his leadership side, is so creative. So it's, it wouldn't be uncommon for him to just last minute change something in the services. I kind of look at some of these churches that are so locked in and they do these songs and they know them a week ahead of time, and they have and it's almost like an act of Congress to change something in the service flow because the production team is so like, if we can't change it, it's going to ruin the whole thing. But reality is you just have to build your systems around that. And you can really get creative. That one of my old creative pastors used to say like that flexibility and that fluidity can actually kind of foster inventiveness or innovation in creating kind of new, maybe groundbreaking systems, and maybe not groundbreaking for the whole industry, but like for us, being able to come up with really creative solutions for problems that other people might not have. And so it's just about embracing those challenges. And we sort of used to say, like, we think inside the box. So what are our limitations, and how do we need to build the systems around that? It doesn't mean we can't build systems. It just means we might not be able to build the same systems that XYZ church down the road is building. Yeah. So when it came to worship, it was, we would always have this challenge of, they want to change the song last minute. And that was tough the more that we started to refine and fine tune lighting and tracks and all this stuff. I like to think that the lighting and the Ableton guys were always the two most impacted when it came to song change. It was like the band pretty much knew all their songs, but it was really hard to load new tracks and new lighting cues and stuff 10 minutes before doors for a new song. But we just started building our stuff around, okay, maybe we don't need to program every cue of every song timed out to the second. Maybe we just do more generic stuff and do our best with that. Make a few excellent looks for a song instead of having every cue timed out. And Ableton was a little trickier. You know, they went and built a whole library of every song, and we kind of created this system of arrangements. And if the band said they wanted to do this song and in this arrangement, we had this sort of tagging system that we could pull the tracks in really quickly and load them up, and they'd have primary and backup systems that they could switch between. So it was always this balance of sometimes we would introduce new technology to help solve those problems, and sometimes we would just introduce more systems, not necessarily tangible systems, but just workflows to help answer those needs. But it's not impossible. Don't get discouraged if your church is super, super creative and super fluid. Just build your systems around that, and don't limit. I remember Chris Brown one time, we were talking about tour, and we were on, I think I had done, one of the last projects I did for them was Outcry Tour, and had done all the programming, and they did through rehearsals or went through the first show even. And I was going to fly home because I just was going to program and then go home and hand it over to the operator. And he was like, yeah, we got to change this song. We did it the first night and it just did not go well. And, we got frustrated because it was like, we put all this work into it and we did all this stuff. But he was like, I don't want the lighting programming to be the reason that we can't flex to what people are responding to in the moment. And that hit. I was like, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, it should not be the driver. It's certainly a passenger in the car, but it can't be the driver. So yeah, just know that your stuff might not always be the driver. It's important, but you have to know your place in the priorities of the organization and work around that, I guess.
Yeah.
Toby, did you hear him say at the very beginning that sometimes they'd have to, say they couldn't do the thing the church is doing down the road? I'm like, Elevation is looking at the church down the road, wanting to do what they're doing?
Yeah.
That's what everyone's thinking about them.
Yeah. We're always looking at other places. And even to this day, one of my favorite things about my new role is being able to go and see other churches more often and see how everybody does things differently. I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. Sometimes it's hard to get together, right? We're all a little tunnel vision in what we're doing, and we all have unique problems. And again, my solution isn't going to work for you, and it might be a good starting point, but you can't just copy and paste because every organization is different. Every church is different. So, I don't know.
Yeah, Blake, it's kind of like, even here at ChurchGear, we still look and see what like Amazon is doing.
It's pitiful when we have to stoop that low.
Yeah,
but
what's ChurchGear's church down the road? Who do you guys look at for inspiration?
Jesus.
Paul.
No, we have,
Judas.
I am a creative visionary by nature, so I'm always looking at what other organizations, other brands. You're a brand director, Blake. So like, who are some of your favorite brands that you're like, what are they doing? How do they feel? How do they treat their customers?
So I think a lot brands have to change and do stuff different all the time, that I don't actually get addicted to certain brands, more so the people who then dissect all of them. There's a couple of podcasts I listen to. But I just, again, love Andy's point that like even Elevation was looking at other people. And I think that's a great lesson to not just like keep your head down in your own spot. You might get stuck into a rut and that'd be a disaster.
Speaking of disasters, I like how you set me up for, are you going to mock me for the terrible segue now? Like I usually mock you?
No, I'm a B host, I'll be there for you. I'm not an A host.
So, Andy, give us a story or 80 where everything went wrong, or maybe it almost went wrong, but you saved the day. Got any good disasters for us?
Yeah. So, probably one of the biggest, most stressful events of my life, at least at Elevation, for sure. We did the Heroes in Heaven live recording, and it was we actually went back to the local arena, the Spectrum Center, and our idea was to have these 3 concentric circles on automation on Kinesis and have them at different heights and different angles throughout the show to create different looks and make every song feel unique and stuff. And we worked with a semi-local production company to make all this happen, but we didn't really know what we were doing either. So we were trusting them to do a lot of homework for us. We just sort of told them, here's what we want. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. So we start loading in and we start to realize that maybe we didn't all do our due diligence on this situation. And we get the rig up and there's LED tiles on the front, on the back, on the inside, lights all the way around, just tons. I mean, it's a huge rig. And the guy that's programming the automation starts doing stuff and I can kind of tell something's off because I'm starting to ask for updates and he's kind of like, yeah, no, I'm doing all right, but nothing's moving. And things start to move and they're not moving like I would want them to move. And at one point, the whole rig kind of like jumps a little bit and starts shaking. And I'm like, let's go ahead and get everybody off the stage. And I'm going to have a conversation with our account manager. And so I pull him aside and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, our guy's having some trouble. I think some things are a little overweight and, we might have to make some adjustments. So I was like, get somebody in that knows what they're doing now, because it's the night before the event.
Yeah.
So we have about 24 hours to figure this out. And so they fly in a guy from Atlanta. He gets there at like midnight or 1 a.m. and he assesses the situation because he's like, I also got to sleep. I got to go to sleep for at least 4 or 5 hours before I start programming this stuff. So I'm not going to get started until tomorrow morning. So he starts assessing the situation. He's like, that big circle up there, that's not moving. These 2 small circles, they can move, but there's no angles. They can move flat. So he tells us this, all right, we're like, okay, I mean, what else are we going to do? This is the situation. So he goes to the hotel, goes to sleep, and we re-engineer the whole event to work within those limitations within a few hours, and we reprogram. And thankfully we didn't have anything too critical and things were a little more flexible, but this was before the days of renting out the facility for a week before and doing heavy rehearsals and stuff. We had 2 days to make this whole thing happen. So that was like the most stressful, kind of disappointing. It turned out great in the end, but it was so disappointing that it was like, we wanted to do this, but we couldn't. And we had to make so many sacrifices in the last minute to make it work. But that was just such a stressful event, and especially I'm just so nervous with anything kinesis or rigging or moving. And so just the like not feeling comfortable with that stuff up front when they start doing stuff that I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with this. Like that just makes me feel awful and stressful. So, but yeah, when this guy from Atlanta came in, he did his job. He wasn't the nicest guy to be around, but by the end of it, we kind of had we had him on his good side, and he liked us by the end of it. But yeah, that was a stressful situation. I think the nice thing about that was everybody involved on the leadership side knew that it really wasn't our fault fully. It wasn't like we didn't do what we needed to do. They knew that there were external factors at play, so it was a little bit smoother of a pill, but it was still tough. Yeah, it was a really difficult one. But yeah, that's the like biggest, I think, disaster story I have from Elevation.
Yeah. And obviously, thankfully, nobody died or got seriously injured.
Yeah, for real.
And I'm guessing
I don't mess around with that stuff.
Outside of the crew, nobody ever knew the difference. Like, viewers who watched the night never knew any different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because nobody knew what it was supposed to be other than us. So to them, it was, it was what it was.
Yeah.
Toby, can you imagine getting that call in the middle of the night? It's like 11 and they're like, hey, so we sent Billy on a rig, and he's like, say no more. I've got my Billy bag. I'm getting out of here right now. Where am I going to fix Billy's mess?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure it's not his first rodeo either.
All companies fire your Billies. Andy, that's my tech takeaway for this episode is to fire the Billies that are messing this stuff up. But for you, what would be your tech takeaway? It's what we wrap all of our episodes on as a general piece of advice to all of our tech director friends out there.
Yeah, I think don't chase the sexy stuff. Chase what's important. You don't have to sacrifice structure to gain creativity. And yeah, I'll agree with you on. I'll echo your fire your Billies, man. Make sure people know their stuff. especially when you're hanging stuff over people's heads.
Yeah.
That's funny.
He just gave us 3 tech takeaways.
And I'm going to take them all.
I know. This guy's legit.
Well, one of them was yours, so
That's
I
true.
kind of took your takeaway.
Yeah. So Andy, you're over at Skylark now, design engineer over there, and we love Skylark. You guys do incredible work for churches. So, I mean, if you want to plug Skylark, of course, but is there anything else in addition you want to plug as well? Point people towards.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's it. That's kind of my focus right now. I just going from 12 years at Elevation to now this new role. I'm just kind of head down, focused on trying to learn as much as I can, grow as much as I can. I've been in the role for about 8 months and still learning every day. I don't think I'll stop learning, but if you are interested in what Skylark's doing, you can follow them on Instagram, Skylark AV, and just keep up. We love learning. We love connecting with other churches. So if there's something you think we can help with, feel free to reach out. Maybe if it's not even a project, maybe if you're just wondering how we do stuff or how other churches do stuff, we do have a lot of exposure into how other churches are doing stuff. So, feel free to reach out and ask us questions. We want to help as much as we can. So I think that's the plug.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Andy, for joining us. We appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks. It's been fun. I enjoyed it.
Hey listeners, we're introducing a segment called Church Tech Confessionals. This is a time for any church tech to anonymously confess the worst thing they've ever done in church production. Here's one now.
We recently started ProPresenter, and I had my team to type up all of the scriptures, all of the lyrics, which is about 5 hours of work of typing, instead of realizing that they could copy and paste into ProPresenter and take about 20 minutes.
How did that, did they find out? Did you tell them?
I just found out in a class this morning.
Are you gonna tell them?
I already have.
How did that go?
They all just laughed about it.
Well, that's nice. They were understanding.
They were. They're very forgiving, but they're a good team.
Hey, if you have your own 3 to 5 minute Church Tech Confessional, record it and send it to podcast@churchgear.com. And don't worry, we'll apply a voice changer and you'll be 100% anonymous. Your pastor will never know.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the ChurchGear Studios.
Blake, I don't think most of our listeners know this, but Blake is actually your middle name, and your first name is Billy.
That's right, Billy Blake Hodges.
So unfortunately, I'm going to have to fire my Billy, so...
Yeah, I've been fired. Also, we asked in the staff retreat on those what would keep you here in 5 years, should we fire Blake? And everyone raised their hand no, except for one person.
Yeah.
Me.
That was right.
I was like, you have to fire me. If we don't fire me, now I think that is me getting fired.
Yeah, it's like, what would our culture be without a consistent firing of Billy Blake Hodges?
Yeah, you don't stop killing Kenny. You keep killing Kenny on South Park. I don't know if that's a dated reference, but hey, if you're like, this episode's gone off the rails, it has. And if you want to get it back on the rails, text this episode to a friend and say, hey, I think you'd enjoy this episode. Unless your friend is named Billy.
And Billy Blake, you're fired.